Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to British English Mastery. I'm Emily Thompson, and I'm absolutely delighted to be your guide on today's rather special journey through authentic British conversations. Today's episode is titled Transform Your English with Authentic British Conversations, and I do mean transform. We're not just going to practice listening, we're going to immerse ourselves completely in the rhythms, nuances, and cultural contexts that make British English so distinctively compelling. Now, I know many of you have been working tremendously hard on your American English, which is absolutely brilliant. But there's something rather magical about British English that goes beyond pronunciation. It's about understanding the cultural subtext, the polite indirectness, the dry humour, and the social conventions that shape how we Brits actually communicate. Over the next hour, we'll explore 5 fascinating scenarios that will give you genuine insight into British conversation patterns. We'll start with a proper British pub conversation. And yes, we'll discuss why the pub is so central to British social life. Then we'll eavesdrop on a workplace discussion in the City of London, complete with financial jargon and corporate politeness. After that, we'll join a university tutorial at Oxford, where you'll hear the particular style of academic discourse that's uniquely British. Following that, we'll experience a delightfully awkward British social situation because, let's face it, we Brits have perfected the art of polite discomfort. Finally, we'll conclude with a family Sunday roast conversation where 3 generations discuss everything from politics to the weather with that particularly British blend of affection and gentle critique. Each segment will showcase different aspects of British culture, from our obsession with queuing to our legendary ability to discuss the weather for extraordinary lengths of time. You'll hear authentic vocabulary, genuine pronunciation patterns, and, most importantly, you'll understand the cultural context that makes these conversations truly British. So, put the kettle on, settle into your favorite chair, and prepare to be thoroughly immersed in the wonderful world of British English. Right then, let's begin our journey in perhaps the most quintessentially British of all social settings, the local pub. You'll hear a conversation between 3 friends who've just finished work on a Friday evening. Pay attention to the informal register, the cultural references, and the particularly British way of taking the mickey out of each other. Right, what's everyone having then? First round's on me since I got that promotion sorted. Oh, brilliant! Congratulations, James! I'll have a large glass of Sauvignon Blanc, Pa. And don't you dare get the house wine. Get something decent for once. Blimey, Sarah, don't let it go to his head. I'll have a pint of bitter, James. And none of that fancy craft stuff, just a proper pint. Cheers. Right you are, back in a tick. I can't believe he actually got the promotion. Remember when he turned up to that client meeting with his shirt on inside out? And his presentation was all over the shop. Mind you, he's got the gift of the gab, hasn't he? Could sell ice to the Eskimos, that one. Too right. Though I have to say, he's been grafting properly hard lately. Been staying till gone 8 most nights. Fair play to him. This recession's been properly grim for everyone. Good on him for sticking with it. Right, here we are. Large Sauvignon Blanc for the lady and a pint of London Pride for Mike. And I got myself a cheeky little IPA. Lovely, ta. Now then, spill the beans about this promotion. What's the new role then? Well, it's regional sales manager for the whole of the South East. Bit more responsibility, company car, and a rather tasty pay rise to boot. Get in! About bloody time too. You've been grafting away in that sales role for what, 3 years now? 4, actually. But Who's counting? The thing is, I'll be travelling quite a bit more. Surrey, Kent, Sussex, the whole caboodle. That's brilliant, but won't that be a right pain for commuting? The M25's an absolute nightmare most days. Tell me about it. But they're giving me one of those fancy hybrid cars, so at least I'll be doing my bit for the environment while sitting in traffic jams. Right then, proper toast to James and his fancy new job. Cheers to that, and may you never have to sit through another dreadful team-building exercise. God, don't remind me about that paintball disaster. I'm still finding paint in my hair. Now, let's examine what we've just heard. This conversation was absolutely packed with British cultural markers and linguistic features that are essential for understanding authentic British English. First, notice the vocabulary. Ta, meaning thank you, blimey as an exclamation of surprise, brilliant used extensively as approval, and grafting meaning working hard. These are distinctly British terms that you'll hear constantly in informal settings. The phrase taking the mickey means teasing someone, whilst gift of the gab refers to someone who's very persuasive or talkative. All over the shop means disorganized, and fair play acknowledges someone deserves credit. Notice the politeness patterns too. Even amongst close friends, there's a level of courtesy that's quite British. James offers to buy the first round, which is a social convention, and the others are specific about their preferences but polite about it. The cultural references are fascinating, discussing the M25 motorway, which any Brit will tell you is synonymous with traffic jams, and mentioning specific beer types like Bitter and London Pride, which are quintessentially British. Pay attention to the intonation patterns as well. British English tends to have more varied intonation than American English, with rising tones for politeness and falling tones for statements. So then, what's the gossip? Any office romance brewing between marketing and accounts? Oh, you mean between Lucy and that new bloke, what's his name, Dave? David from procurement, yeah. They've been having lunch together every day this week. Bit obvious, really. Bless them. Though HR will have a field day if they start dating officially. You know how stuffy they get about office relationships. Remember when Jenny from reception got together with that manager from IT? Had to fill out forms in triplicate just to declare their relationship. Bureaucracy gone mad, isn't it? As if work isn't complicated enough without having to navigate relationship politics too. Speaking of politics, did anyone catch Question Time last night? Absolute car crash, wasn't it? Oh, don't get me started on politicians. They're all as bad as each other. Could argue about the colour of grass, that lot. Too right. Though I have to say, at least they're providing entertainment value. Better than the telly most nights. That's not saying much considering what passes for entertainment these days. Reality TV's gone completely bonkers. Don't knock it. Guilty pleasure of mine, Love Island. Absolute rubbish, but strangely addictive. Mike, I never had you down as a Love Island viewer. Next you'll be telling us you watch Strictly. Oi, nothing wrong with a bit of Strictly Come Dancing. Quality family entertainment, that is. This continuation perfectly demonstrates British conversation patterns. Notice how they moved seamlessly from workplace gossip to politics to television, which is absolutely typical of British pub conversations. The phrase bless them shows affectionate amusement, whilst have a field day means to take great advantage of a situation. Car crash, used metaphorically, means a disaster, and gone bonkers means gone crazy. British people love discussing television programs. Question Time is a political discussion show, Love Island is reality TV, and Strictly Come Dancing is our version of Dancing with the Stars. These cultural touchstones are crucial for understanding British conversations. Now we're moving to the heart of London's financial district, the City. You'll hear a morning meeting between investment bankers discussing market conditions. Notice the formal register, financial terminology, and the particularly brutish way of expressing concern without appearing alarmist. Right, everyone, let's crack on with this morning's briefing. I'm afraid the overnight markets haven't been particularly encouraging. Tokyo closed down 2.3%, and the Nikkei is showing continued volatility. That's rather concerning, Richard. Are we seeing this as a sector-specific issue, or is it broader market sentiment affecting Asian equities? Good question, Amanda. From what our Hong Kong desk is reporting, it appears to be primarily driven by concerns over Chinese manufacturing data. The PMI figures released yesterday were rather disappointing. I've been monitoring the currency markets overnight, and sterling's been under a bit of pressure against both the dollar and the euro. Nothing dramatic, but worth keeping an eye on. That's not entirely unexpected, given the uncertainty around the Bank of England's monetary policy stance. They've been rather enigmatic about their next moves, haven't they? Quite so. The governor's comments last week were decidedly non-committal. Classic central bankers speak, lots of words saying absolutely nothing concrete. Speaking of which, we've got the inflation data out this afternoon. Consensus is expecting a slight uptick, but given recent food and energy price movements, we might see something more significant. That could be rather problematic for our retail portfolio. Consumer discretionary spending tends to suffer when households feel the pinch from rising prices. Precisely my concern. We may need to reassess our exposure to high street retailers. John Lewis has been struggling, and even M&S is finding the going rather tough. What about our utilities holdings? Traditionally, they perform rather well during inflationary periods, particularly if energy prices continue climbing. True, though the regulatory environment's becoming increasingly challenging. Ofgem's been rather aggressive with their price cap adjustments. Indeed, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Utilities benefit from higher wholesale prices, but regulatory pressure limits their ability to pass costs through to consumers. This conversation showcases the formal register used in professional British financial environments. Notice the understated language. Instead of very worrying and not entirely unexpected, rather than predictable. British professional discourse often employs euphemisms and understatement. Finding the going rather tough is a polite way of saying a company is struggling badly. Feel the pinch means to experience financial pressure. The vocabulary is highly specialized. PMI refers to Purchasing Managers Indexed. Monetary policy stance refers to central bank interest rate decisions. And consumer discretionary spending means non-essential purchases. British companies mentioned include John Lewis, a department store, M&S, Marks and Spencer's, and Ofgem, the energy regulator. These references provide cultural context that British listeners would immediately understand. Have we given any thought to increasing our gilt holdings? If inflation does surprise to the upside, we might see some interesting opportunities in the longer-dated securities. That's rather counterintuitive, David. Wouldn't inflation erode the real value of fixed income securities? Ordinarily, yes, but if the Bank of England responds aggressively to inflation concerns, we might see yield curves steepen, creating capital appreciation opportunities for those willing to take duration risk. interesting thesis, David, though I'd be rather cautious about timing such a strategy. Central bank policy can be remarkably unpredictable, particularly in the current environment. Quite right. Remember what happened with the gilt market during the mini-budget fiasco? Institutional investors got their fingers rather badly burned on that occasion. Point taken. Perhaps a more prudent approach would be to maintain our current allocation whilst keeping powder dry for opportunities as they arise. Sensible approach. Now, what's our view on European equities? The ECB's been rather more hawkish than expected, which might support the euro but could pressure European growth stocks. European banks have been performing rather well, actually. Rising interest rate expectations tend to benefit their net interest margins. Deutsche Bank and BNP Paribas have both exceeded analysts' expectations recently. True, though I'm slightly concerned about their exposure to emerging market debt. If we see continued dollar strength, some of their international loans could become rather problematic. Valid concern. We'll need to monitor credit default swap spreads closely. Any deterioration there could signal broader stress in the European banking sector. Now, this section demonstrates even more sophisticated financial vocabulary and the British tendency toward cautious optimism. Gilts are British government bonds, whilst duration risk refers to sensitivity to interest rate changes. The mini-budget fiasco refers to a real event where government policy caused market turmoil. British listeners would immediately understand this reference. Getting fingers burned means losing money on investments. Notice phrases like rather badly burned and slightly concerned. British understatement in action. Even serious financial losses are described in measured terms.
Now we're transported to the hallowed halls of Oxford University for a literature tutorial. This represents the pinnacle of British academic discourse. Notice the intellectual rigor, the Socratic questioning method, and the particular Oxford tradition of challenging students' assumptions.
Right then, Charlotte. Let's begin with your essay on metaphysical poetry. You've argued that Donne's Hiss of Conceits represents a fundamental departure from Elizabethan conventions. Could you elaborate on that thesis? Well, Professor Williams, I believe Donne's conceits are far more intellectually rigorous than the conventional Petrarchan metaphors. Rather than simply comparing his beloved to a summer's day, Donne creates these extraordinary intellectual puzzles. Interesting premise. But wouldn't you say that intellectual complexity alone doesn't necessarily constitute literary innovation? After all, medieval scholastic poetry was remarkably complex, yet we hardly consider it revolutionary. That's a fair point, Professor. But I think what's distinctive about Donne is the way he combines intellectual sophistication with genuine emotional intensity. The compass conceit in A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, for instance, is simultaneously cerebral and deeply moving. Ah, yes, the compass. Rather a favorite with students, that one. But tell me, Charlotte, don't you think there's something rather forced about yoking together such disparate elements? Dr. Johnson certainly thought so when he coined the term metaphysical poets. I suppose that depends on whether you view the yoking as forced or as brilliantly innovative. Donne's creating these unexpected connections that illuminate both the physical and spiritual worlds simultaneously. Quite so. But let's push this further. You've mentioned the spiritual dimension. How does Donne's religious conversion affect our reading of his secular poetry? Can we separate the Jack Donne who wrote the love poems from the Dr. Donne who became Dean of St. Paul's? That's tremendously complex, isn't it?
I'd argue that even in his secular poetry, there's a metaphysical questioning that prefigures his later religious concerns. The holy sonnets don't represent a complete break, but rather a development of existing preoccupations. Provocative suggestion. Though, wouldn't that risk imposing a false teleological unity on his corpus? After all, people do change rather dramatically over time, particularly when confronted with mortality. That's true, Professor, but surely the intellectual habits of mind remain consistent. The same analytical rigor that characterizes The Flea also appears in Death Be Not Proud, even though the subject matter is entirely different. This tutorial exchange exemplifies the Oxford method, rigorous intellectual questioning designed to challenge and refine students' thinking. Notice how Professor Williams doesn't simply accept Charlotte's arguments, but probes for deeper understanding. The vocabulary is highly sophisticated. Teleological unity refers to imposing a false sense of purposeful development, whilst corpus means the complete body of an author's work. Metaphysical questioning refers to philosophical inquiry about the nature of reality. British academic discourse often employs understatement and qualification, like rather a favorite, tremendously complex, quite so. This creates space for intellectual nuance while maintaining politeness. The cultural references eschew deep knowledge. John Donne's biography, Dr. Johnson's criticism, St. Paul's Cathedral. This shared cultural literacy is fundamental to British academic conversation. Now then, let's consider your comparative analysis of Donne and Herbert. You've suggested that Herbert represents a more conventional religious sensibility. Might that not be rather unfair to Herbert's innovations? I wasn't suggesting Herbert lacks innovation, Professor, but rather that his innovations work within established devotional traditions. His temple poems, for instance, use concrete imagery to explore spiritual concepts, but the framework remains recognizably Anglican. Ah, but surely that's precisely where Herbert's genius lies. He's not revolutionary in the way Donne might be, but he perfects existing forms to achieve extraordinary effects. Consider the color, conventional rebellion narrative, but executed with remarkable psychological insight. That's absolutely right. Herbert's innovations are more subtle, aren't they? He's working within tradition while simultaneously transforming it from within. Precisely. And this brings us to a larger question about literary innovation. Must originality always involve dramatic rupture with tradition, or can it work through subtle transformation of existing forms? I'd argue for the latter, actually. The most enduring innovations often work by extending existing possibilities rather than rejecting them entirely. Even Donne, revolutionary as he seems, is still working within recognizable poetic traditions. Excellent insight, Charlotte. This suggests that literary history isn't simply a series of revolutionary breaks, but rather a complex process of continuity and change. Your essay might benefit from exploring this tension more fully. Thank you, Professor. I hadn't considered the broader implications for literary historiography. Should I revise the essay to incorporate these ideas? I'd certainly encourage you to think about it, though don't abandon your original insights about Donne's conceits. They're rather perceptive. Simply place them within this larger framework of tradition and innovation. That's tremendously helpful. I'll rework the conclusion to address these broader questions while maintaining focus on the specific textual analysis. Splendid. And do read Helen Gardner's work on metaphysical poetry. Her insights into the intellectual background might prove illuminating for your revised argument. This conclusion demonstrates the supportive yet challenging nature of Oxford tutorials. Professor Williams validates Charlotte's insights while pushing her toward greater sophistication. Notice the academic vocabulary. Literary historiography means the study of how literary history is written, whilst textual analysis refers to close reading of specific passages. The tutorial system emphasizes independent thinking supported by rigorous questioning, a distinctly British approach to higher education that produces graduates capable of analytical thinking and articulate expression.
Now, for something quintessentially British, a social gathering where politeness and awkwardness dance an intricate ballet. We're at a village garden party where neighbours who barely know each other must navigate small talk, social hierarchies, and the ever-present British obsession with appropriate behaviour. Oh, hello there. You must be the new people who've moved into Willowbrook Cottage. I'm Margaret Fitzwilliam from the old rectory. How are you settling in? Oh, hello. Yes, we're the Johnsons. I'm Jenny, and this is my husband, Dave. We're absolutely delighted to be here. Lovely village, isn't it? Yeah, very nice. Different from London, obviously. Much quieter. Takes a bit of getting used to be honest. Oh, yes, London. How metropolitan. And what brings you to our little corner of the Cotswolds? Early retirement, I suppose. Well, not exactly retirement. Dave's still working. He's in IT, works from home now. And I'm hoping to start a little business. Maybe something with crafts or baking. How enterprising. We don't have many businesses in the village, you know. Rather prefer to keep things peaceful and traditional. I do hope you'll respect the local character. Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't want to cause any trouble. Just looking forward to being part of the community. Quite right. Now, you simply must meet Colonel Henderson. He chairs the parish council. Terribly important to get on the right side of the Colonel if you want to fit in properly. That's very kind of you. We'd love to meet everyone. Is there anything we should know about village life? Any traditions or customs? Well, we take the church fete rather seriously in June. Everyone's expected to contribute something. And the Christmas carol service is absolutely sacred. Plus, there's the matter of the village green. Mustn't let dogs off leads there. The Colonel's rather particular about that. Right, no dogs off leads, got it. We don't actually have a dog yet, but good to know for the future. Oh, and you'll want to be careful about parking. Mrs. Pemberton at Rose Cottage gets frightfully upset if anyone blocks her drive. Had quite the to-do with the previous residents about that. This interaction beautifully illustrates British social awkwardness and class consciousness. Notice Margaret's barely concealed disapproval, how metropolitan and how enterprising are classic examples of British passive aggression. The phrase get on the right side of means to please someone important, whilst fit in properly suggests there are unspoken social rules to follow. Rather particular about is British understatement for being obsessive. British village life operates on complex social hierarchies. The Colonel chairs the parish council, suggesting military background and social authority. The church fete and carol service represent traditional community obligations. Notice how Margaret establishes herself as the social gatekeeper, warning about potential conflicts whilst positioning herself as helpful. This is classic British social positioning. Margaret, holding court as usual, I see. And these must be our new residents. Colonel Henderson, Parish Council Chairman. Jenny Johnson, and this is my husband Dave. Lovely to meet you, Colonel Henderson. Pleased to meet you, sir. Margaret was just telling us about village traditions. Excellent. Community spirit's the backbone of village life. Now then, I trust you'll be joining us for the Harvest Festival preparations. Always need volunteers for the marquee erection. Oh, absolutely. Happy to help with manual labor. Used to do a bit of construction work before IT. Splendid. Man of practical skills. Just what we need. Too many people these days are all theory and no practice. The Colonel's absolutely right. We value people who can contribute practically to village life, not like some newcomers who just want the benefits without the responsibilities. We're definitely keen to get involved. I was thinking I might offer to help with the church fete, maybe run a cake stall or something. Did someone mention cakes? I do hope we're not having another baking competition. That dreadful woman from Ivy Lodge won last year with shop-bought Victoria sponge. Absolute scandal. Now, Mrs. Pemberton, no need to rehash old grievances. These are our new neighbours, the Johnsons. Johnsons? Don't know any Johnsons. Are you the people who've been parking across my drive? No, we've just moved in. Haven't had any parking issues, I hope? Well, see that you don't. Previous residents were absolute menaces. Delivery vans at all hours, complete disregard for neighbourhood courtesy. What a lovely garden party this is. The weather's been perfect for it. Yes, we've been rather fortunate, though the forecast suggests rain later in the week. Typical British summer, really. Indeed, can't rely on the weather for anything important. That's why we always have contingency plans for outdoor events. This continuation perfectly captures British social dynamics. The Colonel's patronising approval of Dave's practical skills, Mrs. Pemberton's immediate suspicion and grievances, and the inevitable turn to discussing weather as a safe conversation topic. Holding court suggests Margaret enjoys being the centre of attention, whilst rehash old grievances means bringing up past complaints. The phrase absolute menaces is British hyperbole, probably just normal parking inconvenience. British social gatherings often involve multiple conversations where people establish hierarchies, share local knowledge, and subtly police community standards. The weather discussion serves as social lubrication when other topics become uncomfortable. Finally, we conclude with perhaps the most sacred of British traditions, the Sunday roast dinner. 3 generations gather round the table, and you'll hear the particular blend of affection, gentle teasing, and multi-generational perspective that characterises British family dynamics. Right then, who's carving this beef? Better not be young Timothy again. Nearly took his finger off last time. I'll do it, Dad. Tim's only 15, plenty of time to learn proper carving technique. The Yorkshire puddings have risen beautifully this time. Last week's were an absolute disaster, flat as pancakes. That's because you opened the oven door too early, dear. Yorkshire puddings are temperamental creatures. Mustn't disturb them whilst they're rising. Why do we have to have the same thing every Sunday? My friends' families eat normal food. Normal food? What's more normal than proper British beef and Yorkshire pudding? Your generation doesn't appreciate tradition. Now, Dad, times change. Though I have to say, Tim, Sunday roast is rather special. It's about family time, isn't it? Exactly! When else do we all sit down together properly? Everyone's always rushing about during the week. Actually, I quite miss Sunday roasts at university. The cafeteria food is absolutely dreadful. Makes you appreciate proper home cooking. That's because they don't know how to cook properly anymore. Everything's microwaves and ready meals these days. There's nothing wrong with ready meals, Grandma. They're convenient, and some of them taste all right. Convenient? In my day, we cooked everything from scratch. Didn't have all these gadgets and shortcuts. To be fair, Dad, women work outside the home now. Mum works full-time. She can't spend all day in the kitchen like Gran used to. I didn't spend all day in the kitchen, thank you very much. I managed perfectly well with proper meal planning. Different times, Mum. We're all juggling more responsibilities now. Though I do try to maintain some traditions. Speaking of traditions, did anyone catch the new series of Call the Midwife last night? Absolutely brilliant episode about post-war rationing. I lived through rationing. Didn't need to watch it on television. Though I suppose it's educational for younger people. Why didn't you just buy more food if there wasn't enough? Oh, Timothy, you couldn't just buy more. Everything was controlled by the government. Rationing books, queuing for hours just for a bit of butter. It's hard for Tim's generation to imagine, isn't it? Never experienced real scarcity or having to make do and mend.
This family conversation showcases the intergenerational dynamics typical of British families. Notice the gentle teasing, Grandad joking about Timothy's carving skills, and the ongoing debate about modern versus traditional approaches. British family meals often involve mild grumbling about traditions whilst simultaneously defending them. Timothy complains about having the same meal every week, but the family collectively maintains the tradition because it represents something deeper, togetherness and continuity. The phrase, make do and mend, refers to the wartime mentality of repairing rather than replacing things. Ready meals are pre-prepared foods, whilst from scratch means cooking with basic ingredients. Notice the cultural references. Call the Midwife is a popular BBC period drama, and rationing was a significant part of British wartime experience that shaped an entire generation's attitudes towards food and waste. Right then, who wants seconds? There's plenty more beef, and I've made extra gravy. Can I have more Yorkshire pudding? They're actually quite good this week, Mum. Well, that's high praise from you, Timothy. Grandma's tips obviously worked. I'll have a bit of everything, please. Won't get food this good back at university tomorrow. Now then, Sarah, how are the studies going? Still doing that, what was it? Psychology? Yes, Grandad. Final year now, actually. Writing my dissertation on social anxiety in digital age communications. Social anxiety? In my day, we just called it being shy. Didn't need special names for everything. It's more complex than that, Mum. Sarah's researching how social media affect young people's confidence in face-to-face interactions. That's actually quite interesting. I know loads of people who are brilliant online, but can barely speak in real life. Exactly, Tim. It's a genuine phenomenon. People develop online personas that don't translate to offline social situations. Sounds like common sense to me. Nothing beats proper face-to-face conversation. All this texting and tweeting. It's not real communication, is it? I have to agree with Dad on this one. We seem to have lost the art of proper conversation. Present company accepted, of course. But you can communicate really effectively online. Sometimes it's easier to express yourself when you have time to think about what you're saying. That's part of my research, actually. The asynchronous nature of digital communication does allow for more considered responses, but it can create dependency. Asynchronous? Whatever happened to speaking plain English? It means not happening at the same time, Mum, like sending an email and getting a reply later rather than talking on the phone. In my day, if you had something to say, you said it there and then. None of this sending messages back and forth for hours. Though I must admit,
WhatsApp has been rather useful for keeping in touch with my sister in Australia. Much cheaper than international phone calls. See? Even Mum uses messaging apps. It's not all bad, Grandad. Suppose there's some sense in it for long distances, but nothing replaces sitting around a table like this, having a proper chinwag. Absolutely agree, Grandad. That's actually one of my research conclusions. Family meals like this are crucial for developing social skills. Well, there's a surprise. Spending time together as a family is good for you. Who'd have thought? Careful, Mum, or Sarah might quote you in her dissertation. This final exchange beautifully demonstrates how British families navigate generational differences with humour and affection. Despite their different perspectives on technology and communication, they find common ground in valuing family time. Having a proper chinwag is a lovely British expression meaning having a good chat. The phrase, present company accepted, is a polite way of excluding current listeners from a criticism. Notice how even disagreements are handled with gentle teasing rather than confrontation. This is characteristically British. Grandma's sarcastic, "who'd have thought," shows her dry humour whilst acknowledging Sarah's academic work. The conversation demonstrates the British family's ability to discuss serious topics, social anxiety, technology's impact, generational change, whilst maintaining the warm, slightly irreverent tone that makes Sunday roast such a cherished tradition.
What an absolutely fascinating journey we've taken through authentic British conversations today. We've explored 5 distinctly different social contexts, each showcasing unique aspects of British English and culture. From the informal camaraderie of the pub to the formal discourse of the city, from Oxford's intellectual rigour to village social awkwardness, and finally to the warm chaos of a family Sunday roast. Each conversation revealed different layers of what makes British English so richly complex. Notice how British politeness operates differently across contexts. The understatement in hedging in financial discussions, the intellectual courtesy of academic debate, the passive-aggressive politeness of village social dynamics, and the affectionate irreverence of family conversation. We've heard authentic British vocabulary, from taking the mickey in the pub to asynchronous communication in academic discourse. You've experienced the cultural references that British speakers take for granted, from London Pride beer to Call the Midwife, from M&S to the M25 motorway. Most importantly, you've heard how British conversations actually work. The rhythm, the intonation, the cultural assumptions, and the unspoken social rules that govern interaction. This is the kind of authentic exposure that transforms your understanding from textbook knowledge to genuine cultural fluency. Your homework this week is to seek out more authentic British content, BBC programmes, British podcasts, or conversations with British speakers. Listen not just for vocabulary and grammar, but for the cultural context, the social positioning, and the subtle ways that British speakers navigate their complex social world. Remember, learning British English isn't just about pronunciation. It's about understanding a culture where politeness is an art form, understatement is a virtue, and the ability to discuss the weather for 20 minutes is considered perfectly reasonable conversation. Thank you for joining me on this linguistic and cultural adventure. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and remember, there's always more to discover in the wonderfully rich world of British English.